episode 153 of In Touch with iOS, a podcast that talks about iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, Apple TV, and related technologies. And I'm your host, Dave Ginsburg. My co-host, Warren Sklar, is off this week, but I have a great guest, a returning guest, Ms. Kelly Guimont from the Mac Observer's Daily Observations podcast. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Hi, David. It's always a pleasure to be here. I'm always excited when you have me on.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun here. This is pre-dub, I guess we could call this. In fact, we have decided that I'm going to have you come on next week as well, and I'll talk a little more about that at the end of the show, but so we can get a little bit of pre and a little bit of post-dub. Yeah. So find out all kinds of things that are going on this week. During this busy week next week for Apple. But there's plenty of stuff to talk about this week. There's some news stories we found. Well, we will be doing our predictions with WWDC, and beta's out, and maybe throw some tips and see where things go. So that's great about the show. We just have fun and talk and see what great things are happening with Apple this week. Yeah. So let's go dive into the news here. First story of the week that I found is Mac Rumors. Apple highlights benefits of Wallet app, Apple Pay, Apple Cash on new web pages. Apple introduced a little new mini website that's dedicated to the Wallet app on the iPhone, highlighting the benefits and features that are available. And Apple explains that debit and credit cards can be added to the wallet and no added effort, and makes them available with the Apple Pay and on and on, and the Apple Card. I think it's fine. This was overdue, I think. If you go to this site, and they got it all animated, of course, having fun with it, and you can scroll through this and gives you all the actually look like widgets, actually, if you look at them. And it gives you gives you all the things that Apple does with the wallet. And I think even a better place to refer back to see what they do. What do you think? I think it's a cool website.
I really like it. I think it's approachable. It's really nicely designed, and also I think it draws attention to Wallet, which it really needs, because it's very useful. And if you have an Apple Watch, doubly so. And I think a lot of people sort of discover on accident almost, like, oh, the ticket that I bought online, like to the thing, can live in my Apple Wallet, or my loyalty card for that place where I shop regularly can be in my Apple Wallet, or whatever. Like, I think you sort of stumble on it by mistake almost. And so it doesn't really show off its utility at all. And so having something draw attention to it, and having people talk about the website that draws attention to it, I think is just going to help prove the utility of it. Cause I have a load of stuff in there.
Me too. In fact, I maxed out different cards I have on there. It says Apple just said to me, "Now you can't add any more cards in there. You have too many."
And with the watch, like, I mean, and if you have an Apple Watch, like, a whole lot of the stuff that Wallet does can also happen from your arm instead of from your phone, which is even better. And I think that opportunity is pretty great. And so I'm glad that they're showing it off, because it's a thing that I think a whole lot of people don't really realize. And I hope that part of what they highlight with Apple Pay, I haven't had a lot of time to really dig into the site, but I hope one of the things that they talk about is the security of your credit card in the Wallet app, and by extension in Apple Pay, because almost every single time I've talked to somebody about using Apple Pay, they basically say, like, I don't want to carry my credit card number around on my phone. And I'm like, you're not. Let me tell you, it's a fake number that nobody can do anything with unless they have your phone and the number and your face
or your
now.
Watch.
Yeah. And so, like, having that security, I'm like, I would much rather have my phone with my credit card on it than my actual credit card, because my actual credit card somebody could walk away with and actually use, and nobody can do that with the things in my wallet. So
when I'm in a hurry, I want to grab a quick bite to eat, let's say, to go through a drive-through at a restaurant, and they take Apple Pay. I just love it. I mean, especially if they have coupons, you can put your phone up and scan the QR code, get your discount, and then just take your watch and pay for it, and you're done. And it, especially during this age of the pandemic was going on this last year, is more so. I don't think I remember ever taking any cash out of my wallet for at least the last year, because I don't want, first off, you're worried about contamination and someone touching it, and this way it's all touchless. You just do it. So I think this is a great way that Apple really to highlight this. And we've talked about this many times here on the show about
and
Apple
it's faster.
Pay, cash.
That's the other thing I like about it. It's faster and it's safer.
It is.
So.
And then the Apple Cash card, which is great because I have an Apple Card, and when I just bought my iPad on there, and you get the little nest egg that builds up, and then you can just start spending your little extra bonus cash you got there. I mean, 3%, not much, but on the Apple purchase, but you get 2% on everything else with Apple Pay. So it's good stuff. Yeah, check that out.
Yeah.
And
I know a lot of people who took the Apple Pay Cash basically and hooked it to their App Store account. So I'm spending, overall, I'm spending a lot less money in the App Store because I'm spending the cashback money or whatever that I'm getting from my Apple Card instead of sort of real money. And then that way, because also if you have everything from your Apple Card go there, and then if you're me and you pay for Apple Music $99 a year, because you don't buy a bunch of other stuff from Apple, then a bunch of other services anyway, then you hook that up. And as you use your card throughout the year, if you rack up enough, you basically get a really good deal on Apple Music. So
I'm going to put that in the show notes. I didn't even think of that.
That's what I do for it. Yeah, because you can connect your app, and then, or if you buy music on iTunes or things like that, it's nice to have sort of that little, the kitty, and you just,
absolutely.
Hey,
well, that's what people do.
It's like finding $20 in your pocket, but regularly.
So who I was talking to, someone said, I got about $700 built up in my cash card. That's pretty good. But you must have spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a nice little nest egg to have put in there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right.
There's my tip.
Next story here on 9 to 5 Mac, the discontinued HomePod now widely unavailable at Apple stores, but still in stock online. It's been over 80 days since Apple announced, sadly, that the HomePod is being discontinued, and now appears to be winding down as the sales of the smart speaker at retail stores, even though availability continues online. Most physical stores do not have a HomePod available, and I think the space gray one, which I have, are gone. The white ones were the only ones that were really basically left.
Okay.
And interestingly, they say as we approach WWDC that Apple may be finally running low on stock, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit here as far as what we think with the HomePod and Home in general. But it was interesting. I know that when they were still selling them, people were looking up the when they buy it and they would get it. It was a model that was made. The HomePod is 4 years ago.
Originally,
one of the first original stock,
first batch
of HomePods, and that kind of told us that maybe the HomePod didn't sell very well after all if they had that much stock left over. But what do you think of this?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of of two minds about it. I never had any interest in the HomePod. I was mildly interested in the computational audio,
right?
Because the tech behind it is nifty. Really is, what it comes down to. It's cool that however you decide to set it, it figures out where the wall is and where the sound actually needs to go, and figures out where the other one is in relation, and which is left and which is right, in order they figure all of that out amongst themselves, and I think that's awesome, and I really, really love the idea of that and the technology that went into it, because really, really smart people spent a really long time making that stuff happen the way that it did. And it's super cool. I have absolutely no use for it in my house. The HomePod Mini at $99 was something I definitely got into. I got one for my birthday, and I love it because I have a really nice speaker in my kitchen now. And because of the direction I came at the Mini, because I had an Echo, an Echo Dot with a crappy speaker. And then I went from that to the HomePod Mini. So from that to the HomePod Mini was a huge upgrade. So there's all these people that had the Mini who sort of went down to the Mini because they had a HomePod, and now they have a HomePod Mini, and they're like, well, the Mini is just not a HomePod. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's not, but it's way better than the Dot I was using. So to me, it's great. So I get it, but also I feel like it was almost a public experiment. And this is a thing that I've thought as soon as they discontinued it, which is that it wasn't it wasn't necessarily like it was never meant to be the iPod. It was never meant to be the iPhone. It was never meant to be the iPad. It was an experiment, and they put it out to see what would happen because Apple wanted to learn something from it. What that is, we haven't seen yet. And it's going to be one of those things where like Apple made this baffling move out of nowhere to sell people this ridiculously expensive speaker. And we don't know why. And, 5 years from when they discontinued it, like we're all going to look back on this on, In Touch with iOS episode 600 and something. And we're going to go, okay, so what they were actually like from here, the HomePod makes perfect sense because we went HomePod to this thing that they just announced. And now the picture is clear. So they learned something from that. What? I don't know. And I can't wait to see how they apply it because there's a whole lot of really cool technology in it.
There really is.
I'm interested in why I have a theory about why they killed it. And I'm curious if in favor of the Mini anyway. And I'm curious if that theory holds up. So
we may find out. Very possible. Next story, this was in Mac Rumors. Apple TV app, which is starting to basically show up everywhere now these days, is now on the Android TV OS, which I was very surprised to hear about this. And Google promised this in December of last year. The Apple TV app would expand to more devices in the Android TV OS ecosystem in the near future. Apple TV app, which of course offers everybody access to Apple TV Plus, content and more, is now available to download in the Google Play Store. I haven't even tried it yet because I have one of those TiVo Stream, which is Android, of course, because me, I have every known device plugged into a TV, so I can watch whatever I feel like. Roku and the TiVo Stream, which is basically a small guy, but it's pretty powerful, surprisingly, and the Apple TV, of course. So it's good to see that Apple is putting Apple TV Plus everywhere, and you're just basically going to be able to watch, and there's no excuse not to watch Ted Lasso.
That's the primary thing that people need to take away from this story is that it's
coming.
Absolutely. And I'm going to take the opportunity to plug over at The Incomparable, we're doing a rewatch of Ted Lasso episode by episode. And I got to host. It came out last week, 2 weeks ago. So I don't remember what the timing is because I'm bad at that sort of math, but we're recording an episode at a time, and then like one a week, so that you can watch one a week until the last episode, and then we'll like the week before season 2 starts, we'll have the season finale out as an episode that everybody gets to listen to. So I got to host an episode over at The Incomparable,
nice.
And it was episode 3, which I adore, which was the one titled Trent Grimm the Independent, and for people who are familiar, and it was a lot of fun, and I might get to pop up on another episode. We haven't recorded all of them yet, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But there's an Incomparable, if you go over to theincomparable.com, you'd think I'd be better with words, but over at theincomparable.com, in the TV feed, there is a Ted Lasso rewatch, and I think we're calling it Football is Life, and it's a lot of fun. And basically, like, everybody who talks about this show is so happy and they really love it. And so you basically get to spend a little bit of time with a bunch of people nerding out about something that makes them feel really good. And so even if it's not, you should watch it, but even if it's not a show you watch, you get to listen to a bunch of people be really excited and really happy about something that makes them really happy. And just hearing that, like, getting to, if listening to it is half as nice as recording it was, it's just warm and fuzzy, like, the whole time you're listening. It's so great. So you can go check out the rewatch and have a good time listening to a bunch of people nerd out about a thing that they've watched a bunch of times already, and this is so much fun. So
we're gonna link that in show
notes. I will
notes.
Plug that. But the thing about the TV app coming everywhere, I am fascinated by this, and partly because I feel like Apple TV, the TV app itself, and TV Plus. Because the whole reason they want everybody to have the TV app is so that everybody will have TV Plus.
Exactly.
Same as like the whole reason we gave everybody iPods was so they would fill them up with stuff from the iTunes store. Same idea.
Yep.
But I think this is an even bigger move. I think this is a bigger move than the iPod. I think this is a bigger move than the iPhone because those were still technology products. Those were things that people could buy. They were after a fashion. They were computers that people could buy that Apple would sell you. And TV Plus is not that. It is a fundamental change in the way Apple does business. It is a brand new thing in the way Apple does business. It is a brand new arena where Apple does business. And I don't think a lot of people are recognizing this as a seismic change, the way that it's going to end up being, because I don't think this is a hobby. I think they've taken this way more seriously than they've taken a whole lot of products lately, to be completely honest. Because I think there's other things that other computers Apple wants to sell me that do not get the love that they deserve on a regular basis. Looking at you, iPad mini. And I feel like it's really important that it get recognized. And I don't think a lot of people are quite there yet. And for another plug, Charlotte Henry is a person who pitched this to me and explained it to me and was like, this isn't a computer you can buy like everything else Apple has ever sold you. And when she put it like that, that was the thing that made it click for me. Because yes, this is not the thing. This is not a thing that they've ever done before. And this is not a traditional business model. It is a traditional business model, but it's not a traditional business model Apple ever had to be party to. All of the things about this are new and different. And so the fact that Apple is taking this seriously by making absolutely certain that everybody everywhere has the opportunity to do this is the part that I think is really interesting about it. So every time they do that, I feel like it's just sort of another point for Charlotte in the column of this is exactly what's happening, and and it needs to be getting a lot more attention. So
yep, absolutely.
And just to smoothly pivot that into another plug, Charlotte talks about this a lot on her podcast, which is called Media Plus, which is great. And she talks to desperately interesting people, and also me, about different things that are happening in the media space. And she approaches it as though she's covering Apple, the media company. And I'm not hearing that from a lot of other places, which is part of why I think her show is so great. So you should check that one out too.
I agree. All right. So then the last story here is, this is an Apple World Today. iPhones are the most popular. Hi, Steve. iPhones are the most popular devices for trade-in upgrade programs. The top device is the XR. Well, I'm using this XR right now as my webcam. And iPhone accounts for the top 5 devices received during the first quarter of 2021 for trade-ins and upgrade programs. This is per a new report from Assurance, a provider of lifestyle and housing solutions. Okay. And basically what they did is they just did a report analysis of the mobile device trade-in and upgrade market for the first quarter of 2021. It revealed mobile trade-in industry returned more than $668 million to U.S. consumers during the first quarter of 2021. That was a 25% increase over the same quarter last year. And they said the most popular iPhones that are being traded in is, again, the XR, followed by the 8, the 8 Plus, the 10, and the 7. And I'm not surprised because I think I did. A family member just traded in the iPhone 8. Fortunately, the camera was broken, so they cut the price down. So, yeah. But they still were going to give her I think before that was discovered that there was $125 for what is that, a 5 or 6 year old phone, a 4-year phone? Was that 4 or 5 years, something like that?
Let's see. We got the 8 and 10 at the same time. So we got the 10. Then the next year we got the 10R and 10S, and then the 11, and then the 12. So yeah, it's 4.5.
Yep. So, and then the iPhone 7 was the last of the models. So that's great. Yeah. Great to see. And I always knew that iPhone trade-in values and iPads for that matter. I mean, I traded in my iPad Pro 2018 model to get my iPad Pro 2021. I got $455 for a 3-year-old iPad. So, so trade-in values are very, very good for the iPhone and the iPad for sure. So I think this is great news. Yeah. So. Indeed.
And I also like knowing that lots of people are trading them in. So I know people aren't just, throwing them away or doing something irresponsible with them, because it means like if they're no longer useful, it's a thing that can be recycled or that they're being redeployed in some other sort of useful fashion. So I like the idea of like if you're not going to use it, make sure that it goes to something where it can get additional mileage. So I like that.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to the topics for this week. We always talk about beta, iOS and iPadOS 14.7. Beta 2 was released this past week and can be downloaded through the Developer Center, and I believe it's going to be out in public beta pretty soon here if it hasn't been already. It usually is released not too far behind after that. And it looks like more of the updates are more focused on under the hood bug performances, improvements, bug fixes that weren't addressed in 14.6. And there's been a few bugs here and there with 14.6, I must say. And when paired with the accompanying HomePod 14.7 software, 14.7 will allow the Home app to set multiple timers on a HomePod or a HomePod Mini. So that they've added that finally.
Hallelujah.
So good to know with that. And that's when iOS. I don't think watchOS had too much as far as any new things. Checking here to see, and I don't think that's really much of any updates other than probably bug fixes like they always do. And that they don't say much. And of course, tvOS never has anything to even cry home about. What they're doing to that. So
I don't know.
But again, I always say if you don't want to live on the edge, don't put betas on your devices.
No.
Don't be Warren. Then Warren always gets he doesn't like when I always say that because he likes living on the edge, like we know here. That's when you listen to this show. So, but I do have actually this 10R is running 14.7 because it's my secondary device. So, and I have an iPad and I have an iPad Pro first generation, 12.9 inch. And I've run on beta on there as well. So then I just don't do it on my primary. So I can't. I don't want to be miserable. So
no. And I personally adhere, especially in the summer, which we're about to talk about. I like to adhere to the Star Trek movie rule of betas, which is only install the even numbered ones. Don't bother with. Only pay attention to the even numbered ones. Don't bother with the odd numbered ones. Which also means you are saving yourself all of the. I'm going to rub my arm against this cheese grater of beta 1, which you don't ever really want to do. So that's definitely a thing that that is a rule that has served me well over the years, I will say. The Trek movie rule of betas. Yes. That
must make absolute sense. So, all right, the topic of the week this week, and it's going to be the topic next week too, because WWDC is going to be kicked off next week as we record this on Monday, June 7th, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll have our Apple event like we always do, and for me, it's a holiday, and many of us in the Apple world here, it's our day to get away from work and really have fun and see what Apple is going to talk about. And I'm sure it's going to be the same type of conference that they had last year because of not being able to have it in person, and it'll probably be a well-oiled recorded machine that they'll have in place, and I'm sure they'll keep it to an hour like they have been. So it'll be good to see. But I wanted to touch upon it, and that's what's going to be fun about this two-part show here this week and next week, because we're going to do our predictions for this week, and obviously I've got some links in the show notes for what to expect and what to see. Obviously, it's a developer conference. We know it's going to be the new versions of iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and Home OS. There was a little bit of a rumor that they were saying potentially they could come up with another OS that would go right to join those OSs that we already know and love. We have an article from Apple World today. Hi, Steve again. They're saying potentially this could be called Home OS, and most likely it'd be a rebranding of HomeKit. And HomeKit, of course, is just a software framework. It's not really technically an OS, but what that kind of leads me to believe is, could Apple have up its sleeve another HomePod that might have a screen? We've talked about this before, or what do you think?
I have many theories about this. I'm glad nobody can watch me make faces except on YouTube forever, where this is going to be recorded for all time. So here, I saw this go by and I thought about it for a second, and then I thought about it more. And when I take this, because everything is just sort of a synthesizing of whatever other sorts of things that you've taken in, right? Like everybody's just a recipe of the stuff that they take in and then they draw their own conclusions from. So here's what I have going around in my head. I have Home OS this might be a thing. They might upgrade from HomeKit to a real boy, as they say. And the reason that I find that really fascinating is because this ties in neatly with my theory about the about why they killed the HomePod. And get comfy, everybody. And for people who don't know, I'm going to give you a very brief history lesson. Years and years ago, I used to work at a site called the Unofficial Apple Weblog. It was tuaw.com. And when I was there, we used to do a podcast. I know that will shock you. And one of the things that we did on that podcast was eventually we sort of had this, there became this joke because I love a good theory. And like the crazier the theory is, the happier I am to hear it for the most part. Like there was a point where we spent the better part of a year declaring as fact that the white iPhone was the Verizon iPhone because we kept hearing each of those was coming, but they never were. So like that just turned into the theory. So I run a home. It turned into Kelly's house of crackpot theories. And so anytime anybody has a crazy theory like this, they bring them to me. And we used to joke about how Philip Elmer DeWitt and his obsession with Apple making an actual television was one of the things that lived in my house all the time. And so then it just sort of became this shorthand for here's a crazy thing I'm about to tell people. So here's how this all fits together in my brain. We're hearing rumors about Home OS, like basically HomeKit expanding into its own unit.
Right.
I think in my mind, I have spun this out into being a thing that you could do the way you used to be able to do macOS server back in the day, where if you had a machine that you wanted to upgrade to be a server machine, you just installed this server app on it. And it was just a utility that let you do a bunch of servery sorts of things. And that was all you had to do. And the reason I think that is because Apple has made very clear that there are resident devices. And that resident device, like if you want to use HomeKit for stuff, you need something that's the resident device on your network, whether it's an iPad or it's an Apple TV, or it could be a HomePod now, or it could back in the day before they killed it, right? But they killed it because the HomePod Mini has something in it called a Thread radio, and the HomePod Max does not. I think they killed the HomePod and put the Thread in the Mini because remember that was the other thing about it was like the intercom and all of that and all of the interoperability. Wow, I got that out on the first try. Of all of the like you can tell your watch, like tell all the HomePods get everybody's butt in the car, and like all the HomePods go off. Hey, Dad said get everybody's butt in the car, or whatever it was that was that little demo, and how all of those things operated together. So here's the thing: is that there's been a fair amount of attention paid to Thread lately, because Thread is this very, very low power mesh network. It's similar to like Hue bulbs. Hue bulbs are a mesh network as well. And so like, you know, you get a little further away from the hub, but each of those light bulbs becomes its own repeater as part of that network. And Thread does the same sort of thing with Thread devices. And so I think part of the reason that they put it in the Mini and part of the reason the Mini is attractively priced compared to the full-size HomePod is because then people will buy them and put them all over the house. And then bam, everybody's got a Thread network. Because if you've got a HomePod Mini, maybe a couple, maybe you buy a new Apple TV 4K because the new Apple TV 4K has Thread in it too. Some of the Google devices also have Thread. This is like an apolitical radio that people can use. And it's just this mesh network. And you can use it for lots of different things. Like I think Echo devices, like if you have an Echo base, I think some of the newer Echo bases have Thread radios in them and all of this stuff. And so they're super efficient. Like I'm not going to bore people with the networking of this, but they're super efficient. And you can have loads and loads of these sorts of devices on your network without maxing it out. Those are the two things you basically need to know. Like hundreds, I want to say it's like 250 or 299, something like that. Like it's a very, very, very high number of Thread devices that can all coexist happily on the same network. So if you think about like, even if I took every single light bulb in my house and every single mobile device and every single TV, like I'm still not going to get to 200 devices even, right? So even if you did it that way, like if all of these things are HomeKit compatible and there's a HomeKit hub and all of these sorts of things, if you're using Thread to have all of these things communicate, it's really fast. It doesn't take a lot of power. So you don't have to worry about like it's going to kill the battery on your phone or whatever, if you're trying to communicate with these devices or do things with part of them. Yeah. So if you take this chunk of information and you add it to the piece where I had Dave Hamilton on and we were talking about the Apple TV and like, why didn't Apple give it sort of an actual upgrade into anything? My actual upgrade for the Apple TV is why didn't they make it a stick? And because that would also make it cheaper. They would probably have to make a cheaper one. And other people said sort of like, why can't you just give me a cheaper one? Because it costs, like I can buy 2 or 3 or more of any other streaming device for the cost of a single Apple TV, Apple TV 4K. And Dave said, they're going to make a sound bar. So if you take that piece and you add it to the Thread piece and you add it to the thing I said about the HomePod in the first place, which was Apple is learning from this. I don't know what yet, but they're learning. If you take all of that together, I kind of feel like maybe Dave is onto something, or maybe that the Apple TV is going to take a different shape. It's going to evolve Pokemon style, and it's going to turn into something else, and it's going to become something else that is more useful. And maybe it's not even going to be, maybe like the TV app is going to be one piece of it. Maybe they just give up on all of the app store of it, and you just have the TV app and you add channels to it instead of adding apps to your Apple TV. And so you get that, and then you put that, like that gets installed on this soundbar you get from Apple or whatever that does amazing computational audio in this teeny little space, and it's like $200, but you get all the stuff that you would have gotten from an Apple TV anyway, and it's got a Thread radio in it, so it can be your HomeKit resident device. I think I've cornered the market on crazy theories right there.
There you go. But I think but this could be something legit. I think this could be something that we may be hearing on Monday.
Hearing that made me more excited because I have been sort of fundamentally displeased with the home app and by extension sort of HomeKit for a long time, because it really irritates me that 2 adults live in my house who are married, and one of us had to invite the other one to the house, but we still don't ever have the same access level to anything, and it drives me up a wall. I'm like, does everyone at Apple live alone? I don't get it. So so I find that personally endlessly frustrating, and so like I resisted most HomeKit stuff for a long time because I was like, I can't get over that I have to invite my husband to my house. I think it's dumb. And I got very grumpy about it. Like I just found it endlessly frustrating and sort of like offensive. I'm like, this is not an Apple experience. This is not what I want from this company. This isn't how this is supposed to go. So I really like the idea that HomeKit stops being this amorphous thing that's sort of a thing, but not quite, that not everybody supports, that not everybody's paying attention to, and that maybe it can just turn into build your thing to be compatible with, to run on our OS, like, and just make it play nice within these parameters as opposed to compatible with this framework that we've given you. And maybe that'll just make it easier for more people to do. I don't know.
Let's hope. Then the other one that was interesting, another prediction is Messages. The Messages app's could it finally get a overhaul? So it's been quite a while since Apple's done anything with Messages. Notably, this actually was Mark Gurman from Bloomberg that put this out, and he's pretty reliable source when it comes to Apple rumors, and saying that iOS 15 will probably add some improvements to iMessage, which could be mirroring all the materials that the WWDC is out showing what they're going to be doing here. Notably, automatically applies statuses and notifications is some of the things we're talking about. But I like this other one here too, for really maybe Apple is trying to look to finally compete against Facebook's WhatsApp, to have messages be more than just text messages and sending GIFs and your emojis and memojis too. So I'm going to be interesting to see where messages go and iMessages go when we hear about this on Monday. What do you think?
I want them to stop being speech balloons. I have wanted this for probably 6 months after I got an iPhone and got a good look at Messages and went, you are wasting all that space making it look like a cute little speech balloon. I get it. I used to have plain, ordinary, boring text messages before.
Right.
Like, this does not feel like an upgrade to me. So just give me little blocks of text. You have a block text, I have a block text. Let it go all the way across the screen. Apparently that's like mind blowing, you know, that I could use all the real estate I have on my device. It was more of an issue when we didn't have near as much screen, obviously, than we do now. But now I just find it even more sort of insulting almost that that I have all this space I could be using for text and things, and you're not letting me. And I find that really aggravating. I don't want, like, I would gladly trade every single iMessage effect. I would gladly trade Memoji and like getting to record the little animal videos and stuff. I like them and they're silly, but I would gladly trade all of that for getting 40% of my real estate back on my screen. I want it so much. Like, we get it. We know who's talking. You can leave them the same, you know, leave a little, you know, make it stripes. Like, the blue part's me and the gray part's you, or whatever. I don't care. But like, do better. Like, I've just been frustrated with this for the longest time. I find it hard to believe that it doesn't ever get better. And so like, that's, like, I want that one thing from messages. I want it to actually take advantage of all of this beautiful screen that I've paid for, you know, because you continue to make my phones bigger, but you won't let messages get any more efficient with that space.
Oh, Tony, guys. All right, we'll see.
Live in space.
I think it's got some promise here. A couple hardware potential announcements in iOS world. Maybe the AirPods 3 could be announced. I kind of doubt it.
No,
but I was going to say, I'm throwing out their potential. I'd be surprised. I mean, the AirPods Pro are still pretty decent, and they have the spatial audio. And but although obviously Bluetooth can't decode lossless audio, and that whole debate we had with the lossless audio announcement. So not much else to say about that. This one was kind of interesting. You know,
I just bought AirPods Pro. I just bought a new pair of AirPods Pro. Oh, cool. Like, I didn't have them. I had regular AirPods.
Yeah, I have both.
And well, Mr. Kelly has made off with them because he tried. I have a number of other pairs of true wireless headphones, and he tried all of them and finally went, like, none of these work, because he ends up with like consecutive team meetings and things where he needs to have headphones. Right. And so finally I said, okay, you've tried the rest. Now try the best. I was like, take these for a week and don't talk to me about them until you've used them in and out for a week. And I really wanted to know what they would be like on his work Windows machine. Yeah. And his primary complaint, he basically had no other complaints about them except, well, now when I use them, I'm that guy in the meeting with my Apple AirPods in my ears. And I'm like, is that really your only concern? He goes, well, yeah, they connect instantly. They sound just fine. They're comfortable in my ears. I can switch them out easily when I need to charge them again. Everything else about them is great. It's just that now I'm that guy in the meeting. And I'm like, if that's your big complaint, you don't have any complaints about these AirPods. So I graciously allowed him to adopt my AirPods, and then I went and bought AirPod Pros because that was what I wanted anyway. So I waited until we got that spring event where we got the new iPads announced. And because there were rumblings about AirPods then too, and I was like, I'll just wait until the new version of AirPods is out. And then there wasn't one, so I pulled the trigger on my own. So there better not be any at WW because I finally got a pair, and I don't want to be that late to that party. So,
and then this one's probably a little more off the wall, but we talked about this on Back to the Future Go with the guy in Morning last night as we record this. It is the 20th anniversary of the iPod. Excuse me. I can't believe it. 20 years ago this year, so the first iPod came out with the Firewire connector and the 5,000 songs in your pocket and the mechanical dial and the small little screen. So obviously,
I'll be right back. I have to go yell at some kids on my lawn.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a long time. And the only iPod that's left is the iPod Touch, and they haven't really touched the iPod Touch in 3-4 years. So I said, well, dude, I'm thinking maybe they could come up with something, maybe enhance it. I was thinking possibly it could be it could be one that'll work with the lossless audio. There may be something with the audio for the 20th anniversary that they can take advantage of that on that device. could they add something like cellular data on it? Make it similar to what an iPad is. I think that's a little more far-fetched. For those who don't want an iPhone. In fact, I have a link here for 9 to 5 Mac that has a little crazy concept of being like an AirPods Max or a iPod Max of some sort, which I think is a little off the wall. But it's always fun to speculate these kind of things. But Brian, what do you think with the iPod Touch? It's hard for me to say iPad.
Well, I have a soft spot for the iPod Touch because that was the primary device that, I love it. I love my iPod. I still have a 30-pin 5.5 gen iPod video because it was an amazing advance of technology that let me carry around the Star Wars trilogy in my pocket. And it made me very happy. And so I did that. Because it wasn't until the 5.5 Gen 1 came out that it was finally an 80 gigabyte device. And so it would back up my entire hard drive because it was a FireWire drive that you could play music from. And so then because the bulk of what was on my hard drive was music anyway, I had a backup of my laptop all the time, my PowerBook G4. And I lived in the future with that little slab of metal. And I love it still to this day. I use it to play music in my car on the regular. And I feel like, so I have a soft spot for that. I have a soft spot for the iPod Touch because it was the device that powered App Camp. And I love it. So I love it. And I spent so much time with them, with those devices in particular. But I think as you were talking about this, and as I was thinking about what an iPod could do, like think of all the things that you can do now over Wi-Fi, because you can have FaceTime over Wi-Fi. You could probably FaceTime audio with people if they also have iPhones, the same way like you could FaceTime, or you could have a FaceTime audio call with those people. You could Skype, you can Zoom, you can all kinds of other sort of video chat over Wi-Fi. So if you took the iPod Touch and made it the size of a 5S, because it's still not even like 5S sized. I don't think the latest iteration even is quite that big. No. If you made it like 5S sized and gave it Touch ID, and then gave it like actual Wi-Fi capabilities and a decent camera, because it could be a little thicker. You give it a decent camera and you give it a decent microphone and you turn it into that thing that doesn't require a cellular plan. I think that would be the magic of that device, because now everybody can have one. And as long as you have an Apple ID, you're set, because you can watch Apple TV Plus on it, obviously. You could do all your Fitness Plus workouts. You could stream Apple Music. You could, whatever other streaming video, like maybe, on a slightly bigger, a little bit nicer screen, maybe you could like watch something if you really wanted to. And you can talk to everybody. It could be a little pocket communicator that lots of people could have that wouldn't have any commitment. And the thing that I always think about that I don't think gets as much credit as it should, for particularly in the consumer end of stuff, is that the thing that everybody used to do when they would go to Dub is they would go across the street. When it was in San Francisco, they would go across the street to the Apple store and they would buy a new iPod, and that iPod Touch would become their beta device, because it would do everything except make phone calls, and it ran exactly the same operating system. And then if that one crashed, or if you had to restore it every 20 minutes because you installed beta 1 because you didn't listen to Kelly and her Trek film ruled betas, then it didn't matter, because it wasn't very like, it was a thing you could, like, if it crashed, it had no impact on your life. Your phone could still get phone calls. Your computer still had all of the operating system and everything that it needed. Your iPad is secure because you don't have a beta on it. And if this thing crashes, oh well. And loads and loads and loads of people I know used it as a great developer device, because I can actually test it on honest to God hardware, but it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to interfere with my ability to make a phone call or send a text message or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there's still a serious need for that device, because the simulator is great, but the simulator is still not an actual phone or an actual iPad or anything like that. So even if it was an iPod Touch, to have that actual device, I think would make a real difference. So I think there's there's definitely a sweet spot for that. And I think if Apple's not considering it, they should, because there's a lot of reasons it would be a compelling device for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Then we just move on and just briefly we'll talk about the OSs that will be coming out. And it's almost a given. It's going to be iOS 15, iPadOS 15, tvOS 15, watchOS 8. One I really want to stand out is, Apple, of course, just released the iPad Pros, especially the 12.9 inch with that unbelievable Retina XDR display. And it makes it really into a true potential desktop or laptop replacement. But a lot of people bellyaching about the fact that, iPadOS is still very limited what it can do versus macOS and having a Mac or a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air. Could the iPadOS really be revolutionary, as I have in the notes here, and come up with something that it could really take advantage of the M1 processor that's now in the iPads, the 11 inch, which I have, and the 12.9 inch as well. I'm thinking Apple is going to come up with. I'm hoping that they're going to announce something that with iPadOS that's going to really stand out for it.
Well, and we talked about this on Mac Voices Live when we got them. Right. I basically bought the M1 iPad Pro, about the 11 inch, and I bought it basically because I'm betting that that's what's going to happen. That at that point, a month from now, that Apple's going to announce something, a fundamental shift. And I think I like the way Brian put it. We talked about this on Daily Observations. I talk about my new iPad a lot. And when we talked about it on Daily Observations, I said, this is another one of those moments where we look back and things make sense because we can see where we are and we can see the stuff that didn't make sense then. And the thing in this case, I said, I think they split iPadOS off because they knew that they were building their own silicon and they knew that they were going to be able to drop something desktop class into this device. And so that's why we got iPadOS. They had to fork it off so that it could evolve in its own fashion. And Brian said, and I like his idea better, I think. Brian said, I think the opposite is true. I think once they developed Apple Silicon and they realized what they had on their hands and what they could do with it on a desktop machine, because it was still a cousin of what they were doing on the mobile side anyway, they said, what if we could take this and put it in an iPad? And then that really will turn iPadOS into something with a lot of potential. And so either way, I really hope that one or the other of those, they both lead to the same conclusion. So I don't really care about the details that much. What it means is we get a huge update to iOS. Like last year, macOS was the focus. We finally went from 10 to 11. I'm hoping this year we just go to 11.1. I hope we don't go to 12. Although at this point, all bets are off. I don't know what they're going to call it. It'll be Weapon X for all we know. And, whatever. Maybe this year the focus will be the iPad because we just got the new M1 iPad and I'm really hoping that what they're going to do is we want to show you what it can do. And the way that we're going to do that is by turning iOS into something useful, something functional, something that people have been begging us for since 10 years ago when we gave you 13 years ago when we gave you the iPad in the first place. Now it can do all of the things that you want it to do and be the thing that you want it to be. And people like Andrew are over at Mac Observer, people like Federico Vitici, who are iPad first people who do this all the time and want it to be that way, are willing to make the trades in order to continue to make the iPad their primary device. And I'm hopeful that less of those trade-offs will be necessary going forward.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to talk about it post WWDC. And I'm looking forward to us.
Once I'm spectacularly wrong and nobody says a word about Thread radios or new Apple TVs.
Yeah, maybe every single thing we just talked about was completely wrong, but I tend to doubt it's going to be that way. So
the entire announcement is just AirPods.
Yeah, there you go. That's really what's going to happen. So stay tuned next week, and we'll be talking about post WWDC and see what happens, and what if we were right, if we were wrong, and stuff maybe we don't even know about. So let's go ahead and move on to some tips here. I wanted to talk a little bit about. There's been a couple articles talking about iOS 14.6 and the battery life. Mm-hmm. It's been draining quite a bit. We've got our friends over at OS X Daily that have a great article here talking about some tips on how to help improve battery life. And we've talked about this numerous times, and it doesn't matter which version of iOS you have. This is always tends to be a common issue when it comes to battery life. a couple of tips they give is one's good one. I agree with this one a lot, is leaving your iPad or your iPhone for that matter plugged in and online overnight for background system tasks to complete. So that'll save you a ton of battery life, because background tasks are always going off. I totally make sure that you disable background app refresh, because I don't even know why that even exists, to be honest with you. I mean, I think a lot of people turn it off because it's just, I don't need the app to refresh all the time and be sucking up battery life here. So always a good idea to go into your battery overview to see what is taking up a lot of battery space, battery life. Interesting. Family members have been complaining about battery life on their iPhones, and I go in and I look at them and I say, I'm not giving a specific who it is, but they do a lot of FaceTime video chats with the family, and that's notorious for battery life. And unfortunately, people just don't understand that. And I mean,
it's doing a lot like that. I think it's just because people don't necessarily take all of it into account, because you've got video going back and forth at, reasonable quality. You've got audio going back and forth at reasonable quality. So you're using the camera, you're using the microphone, and you're you're trying to send and receive instantaneously on that. And that's a lot to ask a device to do, period, whatever it is. I mean, if you are a person who has to attend meetings online regularly, like if you're doing Zoom meetings and stuff, you'll hear the fans, and because your computer, you are asking your computer to do a lot when you're doing a Zoom meeting, because it's all instantaneous. You are broadcasting a live stream at the same time you are watching the live stream of the other person that you're talking to, and that's a lot. So I think it's just sometimes not necessarily characterized like. It's not, it's a whole lot more than a phone call. And I think that's part of why people go like, all I'm doing is FaceTiming. Why is my battery dying? Yeah.
So go into that battery overview. Apple did a great job. I think they added that in iOS 13, if I remember correctly. And that gives you such a good comprehensive view of what apps are really sucking up all your battery life. And Facebook is pretty notorious for that too, if you use the Facebook app. And Mail will tend to be on that top of the top 3 list a lot too, but it is what it is when it comes to that. But
but if you don't want it to be, you can take it off push, which means it's not checking. Yeah. Like you don't have to have Mail in what I call toddler mode, because people have asked, like, what is push? Push is your phone going to the mail server and going, do you have mail? How about now? How about now? How about now? How about now? How about now?
Keep checking.
That's all it's doing. And so you can tell it, like, if you are in a position where you only need to know about new mail 15 minutes at a time, then switch that setting and call it good. Another thing you can do is use screen time. You can go look at screen time and see what apps you're using a lot. And that, because it may not necessarily be that, you are asking your phone to do a lot. It may be that you're using an app that's really inefficient. Facebook is one that is really inefficient. And there are games that can be really inefficient at like what they're doing with your battery life, or maybe, not respecting your battery life. And that's another one that you can sort of, that you can use to sort of triangulate. Like if you look at screen time and you look at battery usage, like you'll find that the stuff at the top usually will match. And so that, if you've got something that you don't spend a lot of time in, that's like your number one battery consumer, that's when you can start looking at other settings and see what else it's up to when you're not using it.
Absolutely. And then the podcast app, that's another app that if you use the Apple Podcast app, which I'm not a fan of, I really just don't like the podcast app at all. Pocket Casts is probably one of my favorites. If you have it set, and a lot of people have them set to automatically download new episodes. So that's of course it's going to start hitting your battery life, because it's going out just like you just said. You want a new episode? It's just like, hey, mail.
Yeah.
Mail.
How about now? How about now? Yeah.
Turn it off. I mean, I want it off, and when I want the new episodes download, I'll open the app and then just give me a refresh of the list of what's going on. So check that one for sure. If you want to do some prolonged battery life, you can use low power mode, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it does help. If you go into settings, battery, and then you can go into low power mode, turn that on. That'll once the battery goes below 20%, it'll start it'll start conserving power for you. To check that.
Well, you can use low power all the time. It doesn't have to be whatever it is, but it does. You can have it turn on automatic. I think you can turn it off as well, but it'll start sort of lessening the stuff that it's doing in the background and things. If once you hit the 20%, I like that it's an option. I don't always I don't really use it very much. But I do appreciate that it's there. I'm Team Overcast, and what I did was I just set all of mine to stream because I was downloading episodes I wasn't always getting to listen to, and I'm almost always, especially now, I'm basically always on Wi-Fi, so I don't mind. I can download. If I know I'm headed somewhere, if I live in Portland, and if I was driving to the Oregon coast, there's a stretch where there's no cellular reception or Wi-Fi of any kind. So if I want to listen to podcasts 100% of the way, or if I want to listen to music 100% of the way, I have to have it local. So then I will go in and I'm going to download these 5 things, or download this audiobook for offline or whatever. And then I have something to listen to the entire trip. But for the most part, I just stream them, and then I don't have to worry about it taking up any space. And I just sort of go in. When I want to listen to a podcast, I can open it up and go, what's new? And then just pick the one I want. So that setting is usually a universal setting in whatever you use. In Overcast, it's probably the same as it is in Pocket Casts, as in Castro, as in whatever else is out there that people could use that are not Apple Podcasts, which also still is having trouble delivering episodes in a timely manner, said the host of a daily podcast. So that's a thing that can also be a problem.
Yes, it can. And then with any update to iOS, you're always going to find bugs. I mean, no matter what it just seems like. I've been covering iOS for such a long time now, and there isn't a time I ever recall that battery life. Oh my God, battery life is just drained when I updated to this new version of iOS. It just happens. So Apple realizes it. So we're at 14.6. I would not be at all surprised 14.6.1 may come out to fix a bug that might be by causing it, but it's if it's out of the ordinary, no, it really isn't. But a lot of griping on social media about it as of late. So I just wanted that was why I wanted to bring this up and just be aware. It is what it is. You need to be on the latest OS. You really have to. Yeah. You really should not stay behind. I know I have so many people that I know that's like, I'm still on iOS 12, or I'm still on iOS 13. Well, why, at this point, you need, unless your device is at the end of the line, you can't upgrade. No, that just doesn't make sense.
You always
understand 14.0. Yeah, when 14.0 came out, it was that's the very first.
You can hold off, and it's fine
for that part. But once the incremental updates start coming out, don't avoid it. It really isn't going to make much sense here. So,
you can always sort of tell, right? So especially what I have found can sort of be helpful is those third digit upgrades, like 14.6.1.
Right.
That you said, we're presumably expecting, hot on the heels of 14.6. Usually it's that .1, or in some cases, the .1 never comes out and we just go to .2 immediately. That's usually where the battery optimizations happen. And I find that though you will get the most benefit from those battery optimizations if you are not on the latest device. So if you're on an 11 and you upgrade to, you may want to stay at 14.5, whatever it was, and just give it a little bit of time for 14.6 to come out, for 14.6.1 to come out. Because if you're on an 11 or older, then the battery impact stuff tends to hit those older devices harder. Right. So somebody who's using one of the few people who didn't trade in their 10R from the article at the top of the show, if you're using that as your daily driver, and you're going to see a battery hit from that. If you're on a 10R, if you're on an 11, if you're on something older, you're going to see that battery hit is going to hit you a lot harder than it's going to hit somebody who doesn't have a battery that's quite that old. So take that, wait until, because usually the third digit releases are the ones that come out the fastest. So we got 14.6. So 14.6.1 is going to come any minute. And, you don't necessarily have to go to 6. In this particular case, you don't have to go to 6 because it's not a massive security thing that is an active exploit that we need to make sure is fixed.
Right.
But you can wait if you're on an 11 or older, wait for 14.6.1 and you'll be able to use it and not have it hugely impact your battery life. It seems like if you're not on the latest and greatest, if you wait for that third digit, you'll usually be in much better shape if you have battery issues in the first place.
Absolutely. All right, and then we got a couple app updates I wanted to touch upon here. The first one is Firefox. They launched a huge major update for not only Mac and but also iOS. They refreshed the design, streamlined the toolbar and the tabs. This is version 89 for the Mac, and of course Windows and Linux as well for that as well. But these changes also apply to the iOS and Android builds too. And a fresh new design, easier to use tabs, streamlined toolbar, and optimized iOS experience. That's probably a big thing, just making it easier for navigation. I've always been a pretty big Firefox fan. Firefox is my default browser on my Mac, so I've been using that quite a bit. I don't use it as much on iOS. I don't know if you do, Kelly, but
not really.
It's good to see that they're doing some updates to it, and you know, as we all knew back in the old days, the iPhone, the browser was Safari. You know, and you wouldn't even use any other browser. But now with the ability of making any browser your default browser, you know, Firefox might be a compelling reason to take a look at it. It does have bookmark syncing, so you can sign in with you create a Firefox account, and allows you. Then I do that. All my bookmarks and when my bookmarks bar, and then all my bookmarks are synced across all my devices, so I can go in and have all my bookmarks everywhere, so I don't have to think about exporting. That's we always do bookmarks into one place or another. So check that out. Firefox for iOS, and see, it might be something you might like, and it's a pretty cool experience on the iPad as well. So and you might find it to be a better experience than using Safari or Chrome or Edge for that matter. So check that out. But then the other big thing this past week was Apple updated all the iWork apps for iOS as well as Mac. That includes Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. The biggest thing they did is they added new linking features within the Pages and Numbers. So what that'll do is that it's going to relate it to schoolwork and the ability to link web pages, which I always found Pages was always challenging to do linking web pages. You know, I'm so used to using Google Docs like I use for my show notes, and I love that you can right click and actually show and convert the link into an actual name of the story, and you can just hover over it and it gives you an actual preview of the site. So I'm glad to see that Apple is really doing due diligence of keeping these apps up to date, because they are free, amazingly enough, and they work just as well as not necessarily you having to have Microsoft Office, but for those of us who work in the enterprise, we kind of have to have that. But so it's cool to see that they've done some other stuff. It looks like more shapes, objects, lines, text boxes, all kinds of stuff within Pages and Numbers that has some good updates. And then they did do some updates for Apple's schoolwork feature, which is part of the student teacher experience with using it as well. So you love Keynote. I know that you use Keynote. I like Keynote as well.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that.
Well, I prefer it. Like, I've used both. I've used PowerPoint and Keynote. I've used Google Slides. I have used all of them. But if I have to start from zero and end up with a presentation myself, if it's up to me 100% and I have to do it from nothing, I'm going to pick Keynote every day and twice on Sunday, because it's the easiest to work with, at least for me, because it all works the way all the Apple stuff works, and I'm very familiar with that. So sure. That's totally just my bias showing. But I also feel like the build options and some of the other little fit and finish bits of things that you can do are a lot easier to make your presentation with, like a slide where something builds in, or the transitions are a little bit more interesting, because when I've tried to do that stuff in PowerPoint, it tends to be really hard, it seems like. And I prefer not having to mess with any of that. So I was really excited to see these updates. And part of the reason I was glad about them is because I like when Apple sort of reminds us that all of the stuff that they care about, all the stuff that they have, and that these sort of changes are things that people want, like the linking stuff that you were talking about. That's really cool. And I'm glad that those things happen. And I like when these things tend to get more useful, like on my devices as well, because like if it turns out that I get to actually go to a conference at some point ever again, and like I would really love to just roll up with my iPad and have everything I need for the first time, because that's never happened before. And I would really love to just have my presentation on my iPad and roll up and be like, hi, plug in and give my presentation from my iPad and not have to huff my laptop across the country. I'm just presuming that I'm going to get to go to a conference that's really far away. So I like when these things continue to evolve and because this is the sort of thing that tells me that Apple is listening to the people who actually use this stuff and they've gotten feedback about this is the kind of stuff that I want to do or the kind of stuff that is hard right now that I would like to be better and that they're doing things to improve it.
Absolutely. All right. We have come to a close of this fine episode for this week. Let's go ahead and wrap things up here. That is a wrap for this week. Please send your comments, questions, and suggestions to our email address, feedback@intouchwithios.com. You can follow us on Twitter @intouchwithios, and you can subscribe in your favorite podcatcher, including Apple Podcasts and many others. But better yet, go to our website at intouchwithios.com, where you can find all the links to all the ways to listen to us. They're there. I'm your host, Dave Ginsburg, and you can find me on Twitter @DaveG65. Kelly, thanks so much for coming back to the show. And we're going to have you again back next week, too, to talk about WWDC. So tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me being spectacularly wrong about other things 5 days a week over at the Mac Observer Daily Observations podcast. Mostly, I'm sort of joking because every day I get the day right because it's a daily show. And so I introduced it every day with the date. And so far I'm 100% on broadcasting the correct one. You can also find me over at the Incomparable Network at theincomparable.com, where I host a show called I Want My MCU TV. And I also am a panelist on other episodes of things that happen there, as I mentioned earlier in the show. And you can find me on the After Show podcast with Mike Rose, which has an erratic at best publishing schedule. So whenever we can manage to find time to get together, that will happen again. And the rest of the time, you can find me on Twitter as Verso.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, and look forward to having you back next week, along with Mr. Jeff Gamet. They're both going to be on the show, and we're going to get this is going to be a spectacular episode next week for giving us our post WWDC impressions of what happened and what was announced and all that fun stuff. So until then, I appreciate everybody listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's show, and really thanks for you listening, and we'll talk again soon.